10 SUVs come through my bay in worse shape than everything else on the road put together. And before this is over, you'll know exactly what breaks on each one, roughly when it breaks, and what the bill looks like once the warranty has gone cold. Not a reliability survey, not somebody reading a spreadsheet. This is what actually gets pushed through the door on a rollback, and the reason I can tell you which cylinder the misfire is on before I ever hook up a scanner is that I've had the same one apart 9 times this year. Here's the thread that runs through all 10. Almost none of these vehicles fail because of an expensive part. They fail because of a cheap part in an expensive place. A water pump is $40. A lifter is $30. A wave plate inside a transmission is a stamped steel ring you could buy for the price of lunch. What ruins you is where the engineers put it. And the quiet truth of the modern SUV is that it was designed to be assembled fast, not repaired ever. Every hour of labor you pay is an hour somebody saved on a line in Michigan or Aguascalientes. 3 things to hold on to before we start. Number 5 is the shortest entry on this list, and it's short because there's only one thing wrong with that vehicle. Its engine drinks about a quart of oil every 1,000 miles, and for years the official position was that this is within spec. Number 7 is the one that made me want to make this video, because 600,000 of them got recalled for a metal problem, and the fix showed up in a bottle. And number 10 is the one where coolant gets into a cylinder overnight and sits there, and the only warning you get is a stumble on a cold start that clears before you're out of the driveway. Number 1, the Ford Explorer 2011 through 2019 and every cousin that shares its bones, the Edge, the Flex, the Taurus, the police interceptors that municipalities bought by the thousand. 2 failures, and I see both weekly. The first is the power transfer unit, the little gearbox bolted to the side of the transmission that sends drive to the rear wheels on all-wheel drive models. It holds barely a quart of gear oil. It sits inches from the exhaust. And Ford designated the fluid as a lifetime fill, meaning there is no scheduled service interval, and over time the heat cooks that gear oil into a sludge that stops protecting anything. In practice, the unit fails somewhere between 80 and 100,000 miles, when the fluid is never changed. And while a fluid change runs about $50, replacement starts around $1,500. The first symptom isn't a noise, it's a smell. Hot gear oil dripping onto the exhaust, which people describe as burning propane and usually blame on the car in front of them. The second one is worse. On the 3.5-litre V6, the water pump lives inside the engine, driven by the timing chain. When the seal lets go, coolant doesn't run down the block where you'd see it. It runs into the crankcase and mixes with your oil, and by the time the light comes on, the bearings have been washing in antifreeze for a while. Prices on that job vary wildly, and I'm going to be honest about it. The estimator sites put an Explorer water pump in the $1,200 to $1,600 range, but on later model years, those same estimates climb toward $2,500, and I've personally seen dealer quotes north of that once they add timing components while they're in there. On a Flex, that repair has been reported at $3,000 to $5,000 specifically because the pump is inside the engine. I'll take the conservative number and tell you to budget $1,500 minimum, and know that it can double. Why put the pump in there? I've never seen a Ford engineer explain it in public. My read, and it is a read, not a fact, is packaging. That engine had to fit sideways in a lot of different vehicles, and the front of it was full. Whoever signed off knew what a chain-driven internal pump meant for the man who'd change it at 100,000 miles. They just weren't the ones paying him. Which brings us to a vehicle where you don't even get a repair option. You get a replacement. Number 2, the Nissan Pathfinder and the Murano beside it, and the Rogue everybody's daughter drives. The problem is the continuously variable transmission, built by Jacko, a company Nissan largely owns. Most failures start when overheated fluid lets the steel belt slip against the pulleys and shed fine metal debris. You feel it as a shudder at light throttle around 40, or the engine flaring up in revs while the vehicle doesn't gain speed. The judder is a symptom, not a fault code, and by the time it's obvious, you're not fixing anything. Out of powertrain warranty replacement runs around $4,000. Here's the part that tells you how big this got. Nissan never issued a safety recall for the judder defect, but it set aside more than $500 million to extend CVT warranties from 5 years to 7 on roughly 3 million vehicles. By the way, whether you drive a Ute, a 4WD, or one of the newer Chinese cars hitting Australian roads, keeping it reliable comes down to what you do before the problems start. That's why I put together the 500,000 kilometer car care Bible. It covers 101 habits that can help your vehicle last longer, the warning signs you should never ignore, and how to spot workshop upsells that quietly drain your wallet. To get your copy, just scan the QR code on screen with your phone's camera or use the first pinned comment below. Then came the class settlements. The Rogue and Pathfinder deal extended CVT coverage from 60 months and 60,000 miles to 84 and 84. And if you're doing the arithmetic on a 2018, yes, that window is closed on almost everyone. One thing that will save you money if you're paying for a replacement. Every CVT swap needs a control module calibration file written to the car that matches the new valve body, and independent shops sometimes skip it. Without it, the replacement can fail within miles. Ask before you hand over the keys. If the shop doesn't know what you're talking about, that's your answer. Number 3 brings us to a vehicle that fails at both ends, engine and transmission, and where the manufacturer helped some owners and left the rest standing in the parking lot. Number 3, the Chevy Traverse, the GMC Acadia, and the Buick Enclave. Same platform, same 3.6 V6, same 2 catastrophes. Start with the timing chains. The root cause is widely attributed to an early chain design susceptible to wear combined with an oil life monitor that allowed intervals far too long. The direct injection version is hard on oil, and degraded oil starves the hydraulic tensioners. The chain doesn't stretch like a rubber band. The pins and rollers wear until the chain is effectively longer. Cam timing drifts, and you get a P1008 or a P1016 and a rattle on cold start that goes away in 10 seconds. That rattle is the whole warning. The job runs the same across all 3 badges because they share the same 4-chain layout and the same 10 to 14 hour teardown. The parts for a complete kit are $300 to $600, and the labor is what kills you because the intake, valve covers, water pump, and timing cover all come off first. $2,000 at a good independent, $4,500 at a dealer. Then the transmission. The 6-speed in these uses a thin, spring-like steel ring called the 3-5 reverse wave plate, and it fractures, sending metal fragments through the hydraulic system, clogging passages and jamming solenoids. GM's own letter to owners described a condition where the wave plate may crack, resulting in the loss of 3rd, 5th, and reverse, and extended coverage to 10 years or 120,000 miles. That coverage is long gone. Here's the detail that ought to make you angry on someone's behalf. A transmission shop that's rebuilt piles of them notes, most fail just outside that window. And note who got covered? On the timing chains, GM's special coverage applied to the 2009 Traverse only. Same engine, same chains, different sticker year, no help. Number 4 is where you stop dealing with mechanical parts and start dealing with modules. Number 4, the Jeep Grand Cherokee 2011 through 2021. I like this vehicle. I want to say that first because what follows sounds like a hit piece. It drives better than anything else on this list, and it will genuinely go where you point it. It also has 3 failures I can practically set my watch by. The air suspension is the big one. A full overhaul. 4 air springs, compressor, valve block, runs $3,000 to $5,000 at most shops, with individual springs at $400 to $800 each, and the compressor $500 to $900. The rubber bladders dry rot, the compressor runs longer and longer trying to keep up, and eventually it burns out doing a job that a leak created. Converting back to conventional coil springs is a common and cost-effective alternative, and I've done a fair number of them for owners who'd rather have a Jeep that sits at one height than a Jeep that sits on the bump stops. The second is the integrated power module. The fuse box with a brain, the box that runs the fuel pump, the wipers, the horn, the starter. When it goes on early models, it causes intermittent or complete failure of any of those, and it's a notorious failure point. You get a no start, then it starts fine for you and fine for the shop, and then leaves your wife in a parking garage. Third, early Pentastar V6 engines, cylinder head failure, usually on the left bank, causing misfires, ticking and coolant consumption. Chrysler covered that under a warranty extension for a while. If you're shopping one, a misfire on cylinder 2 on a 2011 to 2013 is a specific and expensive story, not a coil pack. Number 5, the Chevy Equinox and GMC Terrain with the 2.4-litre 4. This is the short one, and I promised you it would be. There's one problem. The class action alleged defective piston rings, prone to premature wear, and that these engines can burn a quart of oil every 1,000 miles, which causes knocking, low oil pressure, fouled plugs, damage to the timing chains, and eventually the engine. A settlement covering 2010 through 2013. Equinox and Terrain models got final approval in November of 2019. A later suit argued the 2014 to 2017 vehicles suffer the same defect. Buy one, check the oil every other fill-up, and treat that as maintenance rather than paranoia. That's 5, so you're halfway, and the second half is the expensive half. If you're finding this useful, subscribe. The rest of this list is where the 4-figure repairs live. Number 7 is the one I've been holding, and the reason I put it that high is not the failure, it's the fix. Number 6, the Hyundai Santa Fe Sport and the Kia Sorento and Tucson with the Theta 2 4-cylinder. The mechanism is simple and brutal. Hyundai and Kia say the problem is a faulty connecting rod bearing, the bearing between the rod and the crankshaft, and when one fails you first hear a knock, then feel a vibration or a stall, and severe engine damage follows. Manufacturing debris restricts oil flow to those bearings, producing the metallic knock that precedes catastrophic failure. In the worst cases, a rod exits the block, and once oil hits an exhaust manifold, you have a fire, which is why federal regulators got involved at all. The scale is hard to overstate. There have been more than 60 individual recalls involving Hyundai and Kia vehicle fires, many tied to specific engine families. By 2020, both companies were answering to consent orders, with investigators finding internal documents showing they knew about Theta 2 defects as early as 2011, and the recalls came late and too narrow. Practically, most affected 2011 to 2019 vehicles got a powertrain warranty extension to 10 years or 120,000 miles for rod bearing related engine repair, and out of pocket past that cap, a Theta 2 engine replacement is $5,000 to $8,000. Run the VIN before you buy one. A car with a replaced engine is worth more to you than a low mileage one that still has the original. Hold that word, remedy. We're coming back to it. Number 7. The Chevy Tahoe, the Suburban, the GMC Yukon, and every full-size GM SUV of the last 15 years. 2 separate disasters, one bloodline. First, cylinder deactivation. The system uses special hydraulic lifters that collapse on command from the computer to shut a cylinder down, and those lifters are the single most common reason one of these ends up needing valve train work. When a lifter fails, it wipes the camshaft lobe, which means the cam, all 16 lifters, and the guides. And the symptoms are a distinct tick, a flashing check engine light, and a rough idle. Lifters alone are $2,500 to $4,500. With a damaged camshaft, it's $5,000 to $8,000 and up. Owner-reported failures on 2014 to 2018 trucks cluster around 120,000 miles, though I've had them in far earlier than that. People argue endlessly about whether this is oil-related or design-related, and I'll be straight with you. I don't think anyone outside GM knows for certain. I've torn down meticulously maintained ones and neglected ones and found the same failed lifter. What I'd point at is this. GM quietly removed cylinder deactivation from the 2026 Silverado's V8s. Draw your own conclusion from that. Second disaster, and this is the loop I flagged. Federal investigators say a GM investigation found 28,102 complaints or incidents involving failure of the 6.2-litre L87 engine, with more than 14,000 citing loss of propulsion, and GM recalled 509 7,630 vehicles built from 2021 to 2024. The recall addressed supplier-related manufacturing defects in connecting rods and crankshafts that could cause sudden engine seizure. Tahoes, Suburbans, Yukons, Escalades, the nicest trucks GM sells. Now the remedy. Stay with me, because this is the heart of the whole video, and it's the next thing we talk about. Let me stop the count for a second, because you've now seen the pattern well enough to name it. Every failure on this list so far comes from the same place, a system added to solve a problem the customer never had. Cylinder deactivation to gain a fraction of a mile per gallon on a federal test cycle. A continuously variable transmission to gain another fraction. Air suspension to gain a ride quality nobody asked to pay $4,000 for. A lifetime fluid to save a service visit that would have saved the gearbox. Nobody set out to build junk. They set out to hit a number, and you inherited the compromise. From here, it gets more expensive per vehicle and less forgivable per decision. 3 left, and number 10 is the coolant one. Number 8, the BMW X5 with the twin-turbo V8, roughly 2009 through 2013. I'll say up front I see fewer of these than the specialists do, so weight my opinion accordingly. BMW put the turbos inside the engine valley, between the cylinder banks, with the exhaust facing inward. Better packaging and faster response, but it traps extreme heat in the center of the engine, and that heat cooks the valve stem seals. Hardened seals let oil slide down the valve guides into the combustion chamber. You get blue smoke, fouled plugs, and a cooked catalytic converter. The number that tells you everything. BMW considered consumption of up to 1 quart per 750 miles to be within specification. Read that again. Not a failure, specification. And the repair, dealers have been quoted anywhere from $8,000 to $12,000 for the stem seal job, which is why a good independent doing it for a fraction of that has a waiting list. To their credit, BMW put together a care package for these owners. It covered various related repairs, injector seals, turbo oil lines, other heat-related components, on certain engines out to 10 years or 120,000 miles. That's real help. It also expired years ago, and the engine is still hot in the middle. Number 9, the Range Rover and Range Rover Sport. Short entry, because there's one thing everybody buys them for and one thing that breaks. Every Range Rover Sport comes with air suspension. It delivers the ride quality that justifies the price, and it is the single most expensive thing that will break on the vehicle. One air spring is estimated at just over $1,700, a compressor around $2,000, and a whole system failure climbs past $4,000 at an independent. Compressors on many Range Rover and Discovery models start struggling between 60 and 90,000 miles, running longer and louder before they quit, and that noise is your only free warning. If you buy one, budget for it the way you'd budget for tires. Not if, when. Number 10, the Ford Escape with the small EcoBoost engines, the 1.5, the 1.6, and their 2.0 relatives in the Edge and the Fusion. Here's the loop I opened at the start. Those blocks are open deck, meaning the cylinder walls stand up in a jacket of coolant rather than being surrounded by solid metal. That design leaves only a narrow strip of gasket material bridging the gap between bores, barely a fingernail's width, and on boost, combustion pressure hammers that seam until the gasket creeps. And once gas blows past the fire ring, coolant pushes the other way into the bore. Combustion gas raises pressure in the cooling system, and when you shut the engine off and pressure drops, coolant siphons back into the cylinder and sits there overnight. So the first thing you notice is a stumble on the first start of the day that clears in a minute, and maybe a sweet smell you write off. The codes most commonly reported are P03S16 and P0302. Meanwhile, the coolant level drops and there's no puddle on your driveway because it's going out the tailpipe. Ford knows the exact test. Their own service message tells technicians to pressurize the cooling system to 20 psi and hold for 5 hours. And if pressure drops 4 psi and a bore scope through the plug holes confirms coolant intrusion, the short block gets replaced. That's a 5-hour diagnostic and an engine's worth of parts. And here's the part that should bother you. Ford recalled certain 2013 and 2014 vehicles with the 1.6-litre engine for a similar issue under 2 campaigns. And no such recall was made for the 1.5 and 2.0 EcoBoost engines, showing the same problem. Same failure, different paperwork, different outcome for you. Now, the remedy. Somebody looked at 600,000 of your trucks with a metal problem inside the engine and decided what you were owed was a different oil. Go back to that GM recall. The defect was in connecting rods and crankshafts, metal. The remedy was 2 repairs: an oil viscosity change or an engine replacement, depending on the inspection result. If your engine passed inspection, you got higher viscosity 0W40 oil, a new filter, a new oil fill cap, and an insert for your owner's manual reflecting the change. GM estimated roughly 3% of those vehicles would need an engine, which means 97% of you were handed a heavier oil and sent home. Understand what that oil is doing. It's making the film between a marginal bearing and a marginal crankshaft slightly thicker, so the two touch each other slightly less often. It doesn't remove the debris. It doesn't remachine the journal. It buys time, and the manufacturer's warranty is measured in time. Did it work? On January 16th of 2026, federal investigators opened a formal query into the adequacy of that remedy after 36 owners reported catastrophic engine failure in trucks that had already had the recall done. That number has grown. Investigators have now logged 499 complaints of post-remedy engine failure, and GM itself reported receiving 6,953. And it isn't just GM, which is the point. Go back to number 6. Hyundai and Kia's fix on many vehicles was software, a knock sensor detection system update that senses a failing connecting rod bearing. It listens through the existing sensor, and when it hears the early pattern of bearing wear, it lights a warning and limits engine output so you can reach a dealer before it seizes. It does not fix worn bearings. It catches them earlier. So here's the shape of it, and once you see it, you'll see it everywhere. When the fault is mechanical, and the cost of fixing it properly is measured in thousands per unit times millions of units, what gets offered to you is not a repair. It's a fluid, or it's a listening device, or it's a warranty extension that expires just past where the failures cluster. Every one of those is legal. Every one of those satisfies a regulator. None of them puts good metal in your engine. You are not being lied to exactly. That's the thing that took me years to work out. You're being answered precisely, narrowly, in the smallest way that closes the file. And the reason it works is that the word remedy sounds like cure and legally means whatever the manufacturer files. So when someone tells you your vehicle has had the recall done, that's now a question, not an answer. Which recall? What did they actually do to it? If the answer is that they changed the oil and gave you a new cap, you know exactly where you stand, and you know to keep every piece of paper. Here's what I keep coming back to, standing in a bay at 7 in the morning with a stethoscope on a valve cover. Every single failure on this list announced itself. The Explorer smelled like burning oil for 2 months. The Traverse rattled for 10 seconds on cold mornings all winter. The Escape stumbled once a day and cleared. The Tahoe ticked. Not one of these vehicles died without saying something first, and almost every owner who ended up with the worst version of the bill was someone who heard it and decided it was nothing. Because nobody ever taught them that a 10-second rattle is the sound of a chain that's already worn. That's a skill, and it's a cheap one. It costs you attention and nothing else. The old hands in this trade could tell you what was wrong with the car from the parking lot, and there was nothing mystical about it. They just heard that noise before and remembered what it turned into. You can build the same thing in a year. Start the engine before you turn on the radio. Notice what's different this week from last week. Look under the vehicle where it parks. That's it. A machine that talks to you and an owner who listens will outlast a better machine with a deaf one. Every time. So, the practical version? Explorer and its cousins change the power transfer unit fluid at 30,000 miles, whether the book mentions it or not. And if you smell hot oil, deal with it now. Nissan CVT, fresh fluid on a real interval, and if it shudders, price a replacement rather than a repair. Traverse Acadia, Enclave, cold start rattle means chains, and a slip into third or reverse means the wave plate. Grand Cherokee, air suspension, power module, and misfires on the early V6. Equinox and Terrain, check the oil every other tank. Hyundai and Kia 4 cylinders, run the V9. Tahoe and Suburban, a tick is a lifter until proven otherwise. X5, watch consumption. Range Rover, budget for air springs. Escape, a cold start stumble plus disappearing coolant is a short block. Now the procedure, this is the useful part, and it works on any vehicle, not just these 10. Before you buy or before you spend, 4 steps. 1. Find the known failure for that exact engine and that exact model year, not the model line. 2. Get a real out-the-door price for that repair from an independent shop in your town, not a national average. 3. Find out where in the mileage curve it typically hits and where the vehicle in front of you sits on that curve. 4. Put those numbers side by side with what the vehicle is actually worth. If the likely repair is more than a third of the vehicle's value and it's due within 20,000 miles, walk. If it's less than a third, or it's already been done with paperwork to prove it, that's often the best value vehicle on the lot, because the market price is in the fear and not the receipt. Do that, and here's what you get. Not a rescue, not a dramatic save in a parking lot at midnight, just a bill that never arrives, a Tuesday in 3 years where nothing happens, and a truck that starts, and $4,000 still sitting in your account doing something more useful than paying for somebody else's cost-saving decision from 2019. Now I want to hear from you, and specifically from two kinds of people. If you own one of these, tell me the mileage it let go at, what the shop charged, and whether the manufacturer helped you or handed you a phone number. I read these, and the pattern in the comments is genuinely better data than most of what gets published. Because you're all telling me about the same failure at the same mileage from 40 different states. And if you think I've called one of these wrong, if you've got a Pathfinder at 200,000 on the original transmission, or a Grand Cherokee that's never given you a bad day, come and say so. Bring the mileage and bring what you've spent. I'd rather be corrected in public than confident in private, and a well-maintained example beating the odds is a real data point, not an argument. Subscribe if you want more of these. There's a thread I deliberately left alone today. The transmissions that are still filled at the factory and marked as never needing service, which is a sentence somebody wrote for a reason, and I've been pulling on that reason for a while now without getting to the bottom of it. Check your oil this week. Listen to the first 10 seconds of your cold start. And whatever's parked in your driveway, find out what it's known for before it tells you itself.